just to kind of round that off a little bit, ready for some things that Zoran will do with you next week. And whether that's useful or not to think about the senses individually, I'm not sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because of course our experience of them is as a totality. But as I said yesterday, at any one time, we've got information coming in from all the various sensing apparatus, and our brain is kind of weighting them, W-E-I-G-H-T, weight, giving more weight to some and not others. And that choice is a learned choice, and it's adaptable to different environments and different conditions. And it can become somewhat stereotypical. So that's when people say, I'm very visual. It's not that they don't have the other senses, that they're more likely to weight vision as their trustworthy primary source of information. Anyway, so I'll tell you why I'm thinking about senses. I'm quite excited. We've been running this experiment. It's been dragging on for about 4 years. It started as an honors project. And the final recruit is this morning. Well, I don't want to say it because it'll foul and we'll be dragged on again. You know what? It's been going on for so long, I actually don't remember the total research question. But it's about this multimodal way that we process. And it came out of some evidence when we looked at the literature that if you see your arm or a picture of your arm and have your tactile, i.e. the sense of the skin, and that you assess that, so how acute that is, you know, whether you can detect how light a touch can you detect, that gets better if you can see your arm. But it's non-informative vision. Like, I'm not watching my arm being tested. I'm just watching a representation of my arm. So vision of the body part being tested makes you more sensitive. And you know, there's various reasons why we think that might be the case. But I use that as an example of that we are multimodal. We may have an illusion that we are visually dominant or something else, but the senses feed into each other and they inform each other. And when they're congruent, they support each other. And when they're incongruent, like when you shake your head really fast and your eyes are dancing around, you're getting information from your eyes that's different to your head, possibly. It's incongruent, so you feel dizzy. So the incongruence becomes an experience. And dizziness is a movement hallucination. It comes out of the brain not being able to find comparable meaning out of the two sources. So our brain is very busy all the time putting these things together. So hopefully your experience lying on the floor is congruent. So what do I mean by that? You've got this tactile sense coming from the skin on your back, predominantly, which is telling you, so let's just sense your arm, for example, so the length of your right arm. So there's something around where your arm starts to touch the floor, that those little sensors in the skin are telling you, yeah, I'm touching the floor, or the floor's touching me. Those receptors can't tell the difference. All they know is that there's pressure. That's all they are, actually, is pressure. They detect pressure. They don't tell you the direction of the pressure. They don't know that. So they'll be firing off sort of around the back of your elbow, somewhere on your forearm, and then they'll stop firing. They won't be triggered around your wrist, maybe. And then for some people, the skin on the back of the hands is firing off. Some it's the palm of the hand or the fingers. So flip your hand over. If your hand's on the back, put your hand on the front and vice versa. And the difference between the tactile sensitivity, so the skin sensitivity between your fingertips and the back of your fingers. Can you feel a difference? Can you sense a difference, I should say more accurately? Now, physiologically, you probably should, because there's more receptors on the front of your hand than the back of your hand. So you have the ability to be more discerning on the front of your hand than the back. Can you experience that, though? Like, don't just believe me. You know, you're the one who's got a doctorate in your own self. And if it doesn't ring true for you, then that's how it is. And also the area of the brain that's interested in processing information from the fingertips in the front is bigger. They've got more firepower, if you like, compared to the back of the fingers. But see if your experience matches the textbook. And notice that the process of, so let's say you wanted to feel the floor. So give yourself a task to sense, because I've been pretty non-discerning. Evaluate, if you like, sense the texture of the floor with the pads of your fingers. So the belly part of your fingers versus the hairy part of your fingers, the back of your fingers. So if you had to assess the grade of quality of the wool or the cotton, like is it, Egyptian, I never can remember is the numbers go up, it's finer cotton. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Have some kind of evaluation system in mind. Would you use your finger, the front of your fingers or your back? That makes more sense. Now, there's another thing that you're doing to evaluate the texture. What is it? You're not just sensing. Well, you might look, but it's not what everybody else is doing. You could look, yeah. You're moving, yeah. You're changing your position. So if you just let your hand rest on the floor, you'll pick up some tactile information. If you really wanted to, say, pick up texture, which is where actually you're picking up friction, then you move. So this idea that sensing and moving are, the old motor control model is that senses go in and the movement, the sensory impulses go into the brain and the movement impulses come out of the brain. Well, it's not really true, because you're doing both all the time. You move to sense and you sense in order to move. The two things are just happening so interdependently. Anyway, so that's tactile. So let's say we've all have the experience that our fingertips on the floor, it's easier to sense contact with the floor with our fingertips. How about the area across the back of your chest? Can you sense that using these pressure sensors? So what's touching the floor? What's got pressure on it, on the back of you, and what hasn't? Which areas? And lying there, you're learning to discriminate. It's pretty hard. It's pretty indistinct. There's not a lot of receptors, actually, and it's a pretty small part in your brain, both. So there's quite a difference in your capacity. And if you're only sensing your right hand before, sense your left arm as well. And in the back of the head, what's experiencing pressure, i.e. touch, from the floor? And these tactile receptors, remember I said they can't tell whether the floor's coming up to touch you or whether you've come down to touch the floor. They can't tell the difference. You infer that using thinking or perceiving, because you then add in the sense of movement to say, well, I'm lying still now and, I can feel gravity, so therefore I'm lying on the floor. It's not that I've been suspended in space and the floor's come up to hold me. That would hardly be logical. But actually those receptors on their own can't tell the difference. But combined with the movement sense and then the vestibular sense that tells you where gravity is working, then you add it all together and it's congruent, right? Now, if you've had a lot of alcohol or something and you've got the bed spins, not that I'm sure anybody in the room has ever had the bed spins, but maybe you've read about it, or someone that you know has had the bed spins. That's when those senses become, your brain can't put them all together and you get these illusions of movement. They're hallucinations. And we check out reality by accessing very quietly those different senses. So we build up a picture. So you can see they're working together all the time. The sense of touch, so pressure, sense of movement, which is, as I think I've been mentioning, those little receptors we predominantly use receptors that are in the muscle. As the muscles lengthen and shorten, these little receptors are lengthened and shortened too, and they tell this information to the brain, and the brain then calculates and predicts where you're going to be. So there's a lot of predictive or simulation of prediction in the brain. Actually, lie on your front so you can feel this. And bend your knees. Now, actually, no, go, put them back down again. Go low. That was a quick one. Now, very slowly with your right leg, slowly bend the right knee and go so slowly that you can pay attention to how do you know that your right knee is moving, and be really exacting, because actually one of the first things you might feel something happen in your hamstring. So remember, the hamstrings is that bulky kind of muscle between your bum and the knee at the back. Actually, one thing that you would have also been aware of, you might not have attended to, so go back and do it, is how the tactile information changed on the dorsum on the top of your foot. So some people really notice this. How does your foot land and how does it lift off? And use the tactile information. So give that a lot of weighting in your attention, so that you know your foot is lifting up off the floor, away from the floor, because slowly, less of your foot is contacting the floor. You feel less weight, you feel less pressure. And then where does the pressure change under the front of your thigh? And then where does the pressure change in the front of your pelvis? So the two bones of the front of the pelvis pushing into the floor, or might be your belly or something else. So see if you can only attend to that tactile. And for some people, you'll even start to, you'll feel a pressure change maybe into your chest. And then switch your attention to the sensation in the muscle itself that's doing the flexing, so that hamstrings, the back. And you'll feel a kind of firing business, the kind of twitchy, fiery. You go so slowly, and it's quite a volatile muscle, the hamstrings. So the little muscle spindles in there are being, agitated, and feel that they work as you go up. You get this sense of the muscle shortening, which brings the knee bent. You might even feel a bit of a twitch sort of in the back of your buttock, because it goes across your hip joint as well. And in the slow lowering, feel the same. This kind of the jerkiness that you're feeling, that movement, that's the muscle spindles sensing the lengthening of the muscle. And then you're kind of doing this extraordinary prediction about the rate of change. So the rate of change of the length of the fibers is helping you, so that you know the direction, right? You know that it's flexing. Even though you don't know the word flexing, you know that where your foot's going, because you've simulated this, whether you know it or not. And then you know eventually when your foot is going to land. So can you anticipate the foot docking? And then you feel the tactile. And almost all of you are doing something. You're anticipating the docking, and you actually do something very subtle. You lengthen your foot more so that you don't land on the tip of your toe. You land on what? Yeah, the front, yeah, where it's more comfortable. So that's anticipation, because you're simulating, you're predicting, you're feeding forward what's going to happen, because you know where your leg is. Now, does it help to know all this shit? I don't know. This is my world. This is the world that I go back to. Does it make your head sink into your chest? Now, when your foot's up in the air, so your foot's towards the ceiling somewhat, you could just flex and extend your ankle and feel that. Then how do you know that? Well, remember, it's a little bit indistinct because we are very addicted to the sole of our foot receiving pressure, and we don't have it now. We don't have that tactile pressure. So now you've only got proprioception. We're not so good at that in the ankle joint in this context. So these senses are contextual, but you're getting better at it, right? Do you feel like do you sense that you're getting better at it? Yeah, I mean, your 90-degree angles are more accurate as a room, and the movements are starting to look a little bit smoother, which is another thing. Now take your foot out and in a bit, so that rolling around the front of your thigh. So now where's the sense of movement? So again, there's two things happening. The tactile is telling you that the pressure is changing on the front of your thigh, more to the in and more to the out. And then you're getting a lot of signals actually from your hip joint. Inside, deep inside, there's a whole bunch of little rotators, very close, deep into the hip joint. So you may feel them. And there's this is an extraordinary feat of coordination, what you're doing. So you get to the middle and there's kind of, they go silent. And then as you lower your foot towards the inside, one lot are moving to lower, and then they're lengthening and they shorten to bring you back to the middle. And then as your foot goes more to the outside, the internal muscles are lowering you out, and then they pull you back in. So it's complicated, right? They're changing, they're shortening and lengthening all the time in concert with each other, with this agonist-antagonist kind of switch. Now, the words are, frankly, probably driving you nuts. But just to know that there is this experience in your hip joint. Now, of course, it's not just in your hip joint, because you're starting to feel the pressure change in the front of your pelvis. Yes? So maybe you're starting to feel a bit of shortening and lengthening of muscles in the small of your back or your belly. Again, you're flicking between this pressure changing on the floor and the internal sense of the muscles. So you're referencing the external world through tactile, and you're referencing your internal world through proprioception. So not surprisingly, we call them exteroceptors, accessing information from the external world, and interoceptors that are accessing information from your inner world. That's the lecture. So that's the equivalent of giving you plasticine while I tell you a story. I wasn't going to do it first, but I ended up doing it just because it needs to get out of my head into your body. Lower your leg. And now sense the whole of you. So when we ask you to do that, we're being deliberately non-modality specific. I'm not telling you how to sense yourself. You can access any sense you like. What we kind of invite you to do is to differentiate the sense, and then there'll be a thinking thing. You know, you'll think it's something about your body image, and you'll feel something about your body image, which is the sort of the emotional valence, it's called, the emotional tone. And then our brains, all those three things get mushed up. Roll onto your back. And bring your arms above your head. And find a way to sweep them to one side a little bit and then back again. So they go together. Actually, we all have to go in the same direction. Sweep them to the left and back. Otherwise, there'll be havoc. There'll be tears. There'll be tears before bedtime, Jenny. So sweep them to the left, so you find yourself on your back. And then if I tell you that the intention of the movement is to find your way not only onto your left side, but then up to sitting on your left buttock with your feet behind you, does that help you, that intention help you to start organize the movement? You don't get there any quicker, but there might be that destination